All right, hold on one second, everybody. Yeah. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to a Let's Read. It has been quite a while. Quite a while. I don't remember like the last one, to be honest. Let's actually take a check on that. Let's see, what was the last one? Let's take a look. 9 months ago, Cynicism finale. That's crazy. Let's see that we were reading that during. No, it literally has been a year. It has been a year since our last Let's Read book series. So, like last time, this is another sort of philosophy book, but unlike last time, this one is not necessarily a sort of introduction or an sort of layout of a what's it called? Oh wait, shoot! Why is this leaning? Let's push that. Frick! What is going on here? There we go. That's better. Hold on. My baby Yoda fell. There we go. All right. Unlike last time, this isn't going to be like a groundwork for a certain psyche or some sort of ideology or way of thinking and living. This is going to be another piece by our friend Søren Kierkegaard, which, here, let me see if I can find the book, which we did read before. I can't seem to find it. But it was Sickness Unto Death. Oh yeah, there it is. Here, let me pull it out. So we read this a couple summers ago. Another piece by him. I really enjoyed it. Did I understand most of it? No, not really, but I did get some pretty good quotes from it. A pretty good read before school started. Yeah, so I decided to pick up another piece by him, Fear and Trembling. So let's just read the synopsis and then we'll jump right into it. In Fear and Trembling, Kierkegaard, writing under the pseudonym Jonas de Silento, expounds his personal view of religion through the scene in Genesis, in which Abraham prepares to kill his son at God's command. Kierkegaard believed Abraham's unreserved obedience to all to be the essential leap of faith needed to make a full commitment to his religion. The conviction shown in this polemic that polemic here. Let me look at what that words mean. We'll get back into doing that. Polemic, and then I need a pen. Just because I want to get back into doing definitions so we could expand our vocabulary. Let's see. How does Siri? Polemic, a speech or piece of writing expressing a strongly critical attack or controversial opinion about someone or something. Polemic. His polemic against the cultural relativism. Here, let's just write this down. Polemic. A speech of writing expressing a strongly critical attack on someone or something. We'll get back into doing that. I think it's really important to identify words that you don't know. So let me listen to this again. Polemic. Polemic. So the conviction shown in this polemic that an individual can have an exceptional mission in life informed all his later writings and also hugely influential for both Protestant theology and existentialist movement. Alrighty, so with the groundwork laid, let's get into this. All right. So the introduction, here we go. God said to Abraham, "Go kill me a son." Abe said, "Man, you must be putting me on." Bob Dylan. Oh, okay. It's like a reference or something. Jeez, is my hunchback noticeable? Okay. The Old Testament story of Abraham's journey to the mountain to sacrifice Isaac has been read in wildly different ways. It was used by the early Christian church to celebrate faith and obedience. The focus then was on Abraham and his unreserved submission to God's will. In Jewish culture, the story was later used to invoke God's mercy. Instead of the hand raised in sacrifice, it was the staying of the hand that assumed importance when the angel said, "Lay not thy hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything unto him." Faith, obedience, and mercy are social virtues. For a modern consciousness, the story is likely to be read as an antisocial parable, parable of destruction and raw power. The opening verse of Bob Dylan's song concludes, "God said you can do what you want, Abe, but next time you must see me comin', you better run." Well, Abe said, "Where you want this killin' done." God said, "Do it on Highway 61." Faith, obedience, and mercy have been given way to disbelief, arbitrariness, and intimidation. Abraham's journey is the centerpiece of Kierkegaard's Fear and Trembling, but Kierkegaard's focus as originally is on Abraham. Isaac is little more than a foil to Abraham's greatness. Yet this greatness is not, as in the traditional reading, Abraham's willingness to be an instrument of God's omnipotence. Kierkegaard's Abraham is great because of what he suffers in a trial of faith, and far more epitomizing social virtues. This Abraham's suffering and greatness seems to isolate him in a very radical way from his society and its social ways. In impressing us with Abraham's greatness, Kierkegaard, oh my God, Kierkegaard has a very special purpose. In fact, one can safely say that Fear and Trembling is not primarily concerned with the story of Abraham and Isaac at all. It uses the story in order to draw the reader's attention to certain very fundamental questions. The work has polemical purpose, and to carry out Kierkegaard requires us to focus on the nature of suffering involved in the story. In this introduction, I shall explain these features more fully, indicating in some detail the background of Kierkegaard's writing. Cool. Fear and Trembling first appeared in Copenhagen bookshops on October 16th, 1843. Along with a companion work, Repetition, and a collection of edifying discourses, the two first works were written under false names. Honus de Salento, also like Jonas the Silent, um, and Constantine Constinius, a practice followed by Kierkegaard in all the works he later called his aesthetic production from either/or to the practice of Christianity. According to its subtitle, Fear and Trembling is a dialectical lyric. That doesn't mean that Fear and Trembling is a mainly literary work to be judged on the standards and styles of presentation or topic, largely a medium for an artistic development of a literary talent. Since it does call itself a lyric, however, we certainly expect its author to want his handiwork to be judged, at least partly, by such standards. Indeed, all of Kierkegaard's aesthetics works are products of someone obviously uh, delighting in his native literary talent. But to read them as purely literary exercises would be misconceived as well as frustrating. Misconceived because far from being a mere vehicle for literary expression, their themes are very obviously the author's main concerns throughout, and where the style may be called literary, that fact is to be seen rather in the light of the author's chosen way of bringing those themes to light. Frustrating because unless the reader gets a firm hold of the theme and it's not always immediately transparent ramifications, much of the work definitely will defy the kind of immediate recognition of meaning on which literary presentation depends. Oh my god. I think it's better. Back like that. Let's move like this. Ooh. What Kierkegaard means by aesthetic is not altogether removed from the idea of appreciation of beauty. It is, one could say, his characterization of a way of life in which anything at all, and not what we reserve for labels like art, beauty, and good taste, is treated aesthetically. To treat something aesthetically is to grasp it in terms of immediate impact it makes and how it strikes you, in here and now of its tendency to attract or repel you. In a more general way, it is, in Kierkegaard's terms, also treat life itself as a repository of objects of longing or loathing, as well as degrees of lesser effect in between, in short, as pools of goods to be secured and the of avoided, and the lack of them avoided. The aesthetic life is a life dedicated to what Kierkegaard calls immediacy. The word is taken from Hegel, or for whom it meant unreflective knowledge, in which, and this is vital in what follows, he includes faith. In his major dialectical work, concluding Unscientific Postscript, Kierkegaard describes a person dedicated to the life of immediacy as being absolutely committed to relative ends. The idea of absolute commitment to something relative um, is intended to smack of contradiction, as it surely does, and finding some suitable expression for the conflict here will give us our first taste of the theme of fear and trembling. The simplest, but in most ways least suitable expression for it is faith. The word is not only very imprecise, it would be wrong to think of the work as being concerned with fate as such in some general or particular sense, and not rather with making some point about faith. The suitable expression we need is one that says that the kind of faith Kierkegaard has in mind and what, in the words of his pseudonym, he wants to say about it. But we have one more packet to open. Can we assume that it is possible to say anything at all about faith? Here we need to call attention to the Hegelian background of Kierkegaard's writings. Hegel certainly thought one could talk about faith, but that was because Hegel considered his own philosophy to provide a general vantage point from which it was in principle possible to discern the true character of all topics proper to forms of consciousness other than that the philosophical. The philosophical. Hegel discusses two such alternative forms of consciousness: the experience of art and beauty and religious experience. For Hegel, these are not alternatives in the sense that they form equally valid routes to knowledge or understanding. The best that either can afford in respect to being trunicated, another word to look up. And then I'll also put these in the chat just in case others want to also truncated. Let's see. Let's see what he said. Truncated, shortened. Truncated. His truncated career without its topper end section. Truncated pyramid. Shortened. in duration or extent. Cool. Sweet. The best that either can afford in this respect is a truncated and in essential ways distorted vision of the truth. A complete and undistorted vision, or at any rate an adequate grasp of the possibility of such a vision, Hegel calls the absolute mind. The absolute mind is a rational mind. Art is one way in which the absolute mind manifests itself in human consciousness, but only in an opaque fashion, in the experience of beauty, and more especially in art than in nature. The rational appears in bodily form to our senses. Religion is a better but still opaque medium for absolute mind. Here, the rational appeals both to the senses and to the intellect, insofar as it is given a narrative structure, which in Christianity is possible in this form of consciousness, but the content is still only symbolic or pictorial. Philosophy is the highest manifestation of the absolute mind, and here all the art manifestation of the absolute mind. Oh, and here all that art manifests and all that religion manifests of the absolute mind acquires its adequate rational expression. Naturally, then, the Hegelian regards religious faith as a provisional state of mind. In order to grasp reality in the manner appropriate to the rational reality it is, one must go further. One must proceed to the point of view of philosophy, and one will be able to convert one's religious faith into what the phenomenon really is, and whatever that is not what it is was for one who had it. Then one will not only have gone further into faith, but also put faith in its proper perspective in the scheme of things. One will put one will have put it, moreover, in the form of concepts, transcribed it into a form of shareable thoughts in the words of common language. We notice that Kierkegaard has given his author the name Jonas de Salento, which is allegedly borrowed from one of Grimm's fairy tales, The Faithful Servant. Kierkegaard's John of Silence is not, however, at all a silent person. If he was, he wouldn't be an author. Nor was the faithful servant in the fairy tale. His old master, the young king of three dangers threatening him, though realizing that in doing so he would be turned to stone. Jonas, the author, is no slouch with words, and yet he finds it difficult to say anything about faith except that it is something which, if you have it, you will not be able to explain to anyone else. Instead of seeing faith from some elevated point of view like Hegel's system, Kierkegaard's author conveys to us the hard fact that faith, if it is anything, simply has no place in a system of thought. That faith begins precisely where thinking leaves off. Faith for Jonas de Salento is an expression rather than the limit of what can be thought. A person who has it cannot say what it is he has, or at least he cannot say what faith is from any systematic or scientific point of view. But having read Fear and Trembling, we might even suppose that Kierkegaard has wanted his pseudonym to tell us that if someone genuinely has faith, as Abraham, the father of Isaac, is said to have proved by his willingness to sacrifice Isaac, then that person has the respect then that person has, in that respect, exiled himself from the realm of human discourse. His faith is an affront to humanity as we generally understand this. That is more or less well defined set of dispositions that we expect or recognize in each other and value. There may be doubts as to the precise extent of the inintelligibility that Kierkegaard would have his author attribute to having faith, but the general drift of Fear and Trembling's treatment of faith is clear enough if we are to talk of faith at all in at all. It is something we can explain in any language that suffices for people to describe and justify their actions and attitudes for one another. Fear and Trembling has a preface, which says that faith in Kierkegaard's time is thought to be where one's life begins, not where one aims to end. A parallel is drawn with doubt. The Greek skeptics strove all their lives to retain their suspension of judgment, and thus, as they saw it, their peace of mind against every pressure that threatened to extort a decision from them in some matter of controversy. Doubt was what they sought to preserve, not a state of immaturity they felt bound to overcome. So, to with the prevalent Hegelian notion of faith, it is not grasped as something hard to come by. To be able to believe, as Jonas says in his preference, that his contemporaries do, that faith is the beginning and not the end, one must have a cheapened conception of faith. One must think of faith as a state of certain kind of uh, one must think of faith as a certain kind, which it is right and proper for mature human beings to overcome. Faith is then not the highest one can aspire to, as it was for former generations, nor therefore are the goals of contemporaries set themselves the same as those by generations for whom faith was a task for a whole lifetime. Take Abraham, the father of faith. His faith is said to have been put to test by God, a grim test by any standards. Abraham has to be prepared, and to the point of actually performing the deed, to kill his only and much loved son Isaac. Abraham withstood the test, but was allowed at the last moment to sacrifice a lamb instead, and has ever after been celebrated as a worthy father of nations and families descended from his son. But the celebration is performed merely in words. We not only do not understand what Abraham went through, we are led by Hegelian philosophy to suppose that we have the measure of Abraham's greatness, and that the faith Abraham bore witness to is to be treated as though it were a children's disease which one must hope to get over as soon as possible. Sydney, 100s. Good to see you, dude. You know him. You know Abraham and Isaac. Let's see. Uh, I am BTS. I'm BTS. I am BTS. Let's see. That's me. Jungkook. Bro, let's see if I have anything fun in my room to display really quickly. I have this. Wait. Hold on. Bro, he has a wiener. He's a wiener. It's a cute little detail. I'm showing the truth. I'm showing his truth. All right. Now time to get back to Abraham and Isaac and the preface and introduction to this. Sydney, did you see the video of the guy naring his butt on YouTube, and it's like still up, and he like shaved his balls on YouTube, and he like, dude, you got to check that out. Dude, you have to check it out. It's like wild. I'm surprised it's on YouTube. He got all the hair out of his butt, and he like flashes his butthole on like in the first 4 seconds of the video. Here, I'll post the link. I'll post the link. Let me grab that really quick. Oh, dude. Guy Nair's butt. Yeah, removing butt hairs using Nair cream. Here, let me give this to you here. For a friend. Let me know how that goes. Oh, and this is in the Bible. It's Fear and Trembling by Søren Kierkegaard. But you know, like all those philosophers back then were like all really religious and stuff. Here, I posted the link in the chat. Hopefully it's there. Tell me he wants to see the video. Let me know how it goes. Hopefully the link is there in the chat. We shall see. All right. See, where were we on this? In the epilogue, Jonas de Salento asks whether the only way to raise the value of what we consider to be human ideals is to be less complacent, more critical about having already attained them, if for no other reason than to have something to fill the time with by taking up the slack. He offers an alternative to see what life's problems and tasks really are, to keep them fresh in mind, and to bear in mind that they are not only to be solved and performed by acquiring new forms of consciousness in which the problems and tasks virtually disappear as they do for Heligians, so that succeeding generations inherit the solutions without having to face the problems. The most embracing general message of Fear and Trembling seems to be then that the notion of faith is, in current discussion of it, so far cheapened that what is talked about is not properly called faith at all, and that if we are to praise venerable figures like Abraham, or Abraham in particular, since he is revered as the father of faith, we should be made to appreciate what it was like to be Abraham undergoing the trial of faith. Let's underline that. If Abraham is to be said to be great, then we should be giving a clear picture of what it was that he achieved. This Jonas de Salento sets out to do in the first of the Fear of Trembling's two fairly neat divisions. This first part is lyrical rather than dialectical. We are tuned to the right frame of mind in the short section, which presents four different versions of the Abraham and Isaac story, all of which would make Abraham intelligible to us, but none of which would make him the father of faith. Our author presents the four versions as imagined by someone who was first gripped by the story as a child, but later, without losing his sense of grandeur of Abraham, has grown increasingly perplexed about what Abraham actually did, and tries to put himself in the position of an observer of the events, not, we are told, to add detail of immediate experience to his earlier fascination, but to try and grasp in thought what happened, an attempt which Jonas de Salento, as it were, takes over, and whose nature earns for his lyric the qualification dialectical. There follows a speech in praise of Abraham. The notion of speech is central to Jonas de Salento's lyrical effort at conveying to us what Abraham actually went through. Fear and Trembling has as its central concern the question of whether what faith is spoken about. Their conclusion appears to be that it cannot. We certainly speak about Abraham. We can speak about him in many ways, as the child hearing the story for the first time and who has yet learned the distinction employ when adult, or as our author goes into more ironic vein to point out in this following section. Hold on. Yo, this is a lit picture. wait, shoot, I got a text. See what's going on. Alrighty, let's continue. In the way of the cleric who knows the distinction but fails to apply them as he goes through the verbal motions of praising Abraham in his Sunday sermon, or as we are told in the speech, in which the way of the poet who sees in his hero a better nature that he might himself have aspired to, but as a poet prefers merely to commemorate by giving expression to. Jonas de Salento takes us further than all of these. He tries to convey what it must have meant to Abraham to be told by God that he was to sacrifice Isaac, to want to bear witness to his faith, but to be able to do so only by putting his own son to death. Abraham could have been great in a number of ways. He might have sacrificed himself instead, or sacrificed Isaac, but in resignation rather than faith. But his special greatness was that in doing what he did not doubt that he would get Isaac back. Abraham believed he would not keep Isaac, at least have him restored, whatever he did, even to the point of killing him. His greatness was to be able to keep that faith in that circumstance and in the context of all that Isaac meant to him, and thus in full view of the extent of his loss, gave his belief, his greatness on three counts. In respect, here I'm going to underline this. In respect of what he loved, which was God, of what he confidently expected, the impossible, and of what he strove with, not the world or himself, but again, it was God. The sum of what Jonas de Salento can say here about is that Abraham was willing and, in the most extreme test imaginable, proved himself able to accept that human life, Isaac, Abraham's everyone, acquires its meaning and the value from the source of creation itself, not from the raging element and forces of creation that confront a person and bear him along in the world, both outside and in dark passion inside his own soul. But although our author can admire Abraham for this, there is still the question of whether he can understand him. This question is raised in the second, more properly dialectical part of Fear and Trembling. This part opens with a preamble from the heart that sets the stage by giving graphic accounts of distinction we need to understand what faith means in this context. By dialect, Kierkegaard means something not far removed from the modern philosophers would call conceptual analysis, or the clarification of distinctions, though here distinctions hard to face rather than hard to make. The most manifest aim of the section called Problemata, to which the unbosoming is a preliminary, is to show that Abraham is indeed to be praised for the specific greatness attributed to him in the speech, and certain central principles of Hegelian philosophy are untenable. Ooh, a new word. Untenable. Let's look that up. Untenable. So that's how you say it, right? Untenable. Let's write it down. And like I said, I recommend for those at home to also, if you hear a word that you don't know, to look it up, because it is always good to have new vocabulary words in your pocket. So untenable, not to be maintained. Oh, like to tend. That makes sense. Not able to be maintained against attack or objection. Cool. Conversely, if there are tenable, then Hegelian should not be paying lip service to Abraham's greatness. The principles are taken up by the three problemata, which form the dialectical part of fear and trembling. According to Hegel's concept of what he calls the ethical life, behavior is moral when it contributes to the maintenance of ethical unit formed by any society. Actions undertaken by the individual of his own behalf lack a moral aspect unless they can be linked in intention and/or/slash fact to the well-being of society as a whole, and an individual who feels unbound by ties of association and duty, or does not see the necessity in respect of his own well-being of personal participation in the social whole, lacks insight into the true rational relationship between the individual and society, or in the terminology both Hegel and Kierkegaard use, between particular and universal. In Fear and Trembling, the requirement of ethics is stated, though perhaps only postulated, as as being that the individual should be doing something for the universal. According to this view, to do what would normally count as contrary to your duties can only be justified if this were some wilder benefit to the universal at stake. Thus, you can be called upon in the service of the state to act contrary to your obligations as a father or as a mother. If what you are called upon to do is, say, sign a death warrant for the execution of your son, you'll be exonerated for the aspect of your action which would otherwise be labeled a moral outrage against your child. Indeed, not only will you be exonerated, but acclaimed as a kind of moral hero. But if you were to carry out the same aspect of the action outside such contexts, and if there were nothing in the action that counted as doing something for the universal, then ethically speaking, you would be damaged. But that is just Abraham's situation. He is prepared to kill his own son, even though in doing so, he does nothing for the universal. Indeed, as our author points out, there is an added irony to the case of Abraham, since it had been God's promise to him that though Isaac he was to be the propagator of the nations, that the very repository of any universal, insofar as the universal enters into Abraham's act, it does so only as it lies concealed in Isaac's loins. If Abraham's act is not to be simple or even compound murder, then there must be some higher court of appeal than that of the ethical life. There must be some authority that can be called absolute in relation to the ethical life, and in relation to which the ethical life itself is merely relative. The situation where that condition is satisfied, Jonas de Salento calls the theological suspension of the ethical, since in that case the ethical life no longer has its goal within itself, but is a subservient as a whole to some other end, or telos. Kierkegaard's use of Abraham and Isaac in the story of Fear and Trembling has caused much controversy. It has led to some to reject Kierkegaard's thought as out of hand, as committing him to the view that barbaric acts can be sanctioned by appeal to faith. Others, more inclined to the sympathetic to Kierkegaard from the start, have sought for saving interpretations, for instance, in the fact that Fear and Trembling is, after all, the work of a pseudonym, and the views expressed are not only to be identified as Kierkegaard's own, or Kierkegaard was half poet and so inclined to select his examples for the immediate impact rather than the analogical accuracy, or else his concern of the polemical, and so Abraham and Isaac example can be cataloged as strategic exaggeration, and so on. I would not disparage such attempts to save Kierkegaard, or even the decision to reject his thought out of hand, and I certainly would not do so without sufficient space to spread out to the various views and assesses them. However, it seems to me that such reactions are often based on a failure to look closely enough at the actual text and to follow the argument. The first place to look at is at this notion of faith. What is it that Abraham is supposed to exemplify? Let me In this preamble from the heart, Ioannis de Salento presents us with a graphically drawn distinction between resignation and faith, represented in the figures of their respective knights. There is no faith in Kierkegaard's sense without prior resignation. More than that, there is no faith unless the believer takes with him something essential to the night of resignation, and with him something essential in the night of resignation. And there is no resignation unless there is something in the world that a person wants, in the strong sense in which one says he or she has set his or her heart on it. Resignation is, as it were, renouncing one's most cherished hopes when whatever is hoped for proves unattainable. Actually, that's a pretty good definition. Mm. Resignation is not giving up thinking about one's heart's desires. On the contrary, being resigned requires retaining the original interest, but accepting that nothing on earth will permit it to be satisfied. If you were to accept that it could indeed be satisfied, it could only be on the strength of the absurd. The word absurd here means not logically impossible, but humanly impossible. Or in a way, any intelligible way is impossible. When a friend dies, one may want more than anything for that friend's life to be restored. And of course, that is not possible. One could only think it was possible on the strength of the absurd. And if one did think it possible on the strength of the absurd, one would no doubt be convicted of absurdity oneself if one let one's hope, even expectations, be known. There is no logical absurdity in the hope or expectation. One doesn't wish that one's friend were both dead and alive, only alive, but it is nevertheless an absurd hope or expectation, and anyone entertaining such could only do so in the full consciousness that the absurd must actually take place for fulfillment to occur. If, for instance, one entertained the hope that or expect wait if for instance one entertained the hope or expectation without fully facing up to the fact or conviction that its fulfillment is a human impossibility, one would be able to be confused in the night of resignation. If the case of resurrection sounds too far-fetched, take our author's own example. A young man falls in love with a princess, but then realizes he has no prospects there and resigns himself to the impossibility. The idea of there being any prospects is therefore now absurd. Clearly, it is not a contradiction. Who knows? Perhaps one day he will find himself in a situation where the princess is no longer out of bounds. But so long as he resigned, he does not contemplate that possibility. Faith is then the young man's ability to not even just contemplate the possibility, but to accept that what is possible is in fact in store for him. That's also a really good definition of faith. Or I guess a nice, it seems pretty secular to me. As Jonas points out, what people often mean by faith is something much less, something one needs in order to renounce everything. Not something that itself presupposes that one has renounced everything. Another thing, faith is almost exclusively linked to the idea of belief in God's existence, but that is not at all what it is meant here. Jonas envisages, I think it's just another word for envisions the situation had Abraham only resigned. Recognition for Abraham would not be too my God, Jesus Christ. Resignation for Abraham would not be his denying himself the belief that God exists. According to Jonas, resignation on Abraham's part would be giving up Isaac to God. The resigned Abraham would not expect to get Isaac back. But that would not be because there was no God to manipulate the superhuman possibilities need to restore Isaac. Rather, it would be because God was not the kind of deity one could count on to be disposed to give back to Abraham his opportunity to exercise parental love. The resigned Abraham believes God wants him to sacrifice Isaac, and that the sacrifice will be the end of Isaac as far as he is concerned. I'm starting to get this. So I'm starting to get the main idea of this thing. And my main idea is that he's first defined faith, and he is now defining resignation, because the entirety of the main book, oh my God, this light. Oh, that's not very nice either. Oh, I need tape for that, because yeah. So he's laying down the groundwork for not only resignation, for faith, but not only that, resignation to distinguish or to basically, show us what the book is about, or to kind of give us an introduction. So when we get into the book, I guess that's what an introduction does. But in the case of Abraham and his son Isaac, it is resignation in the sense that he believes that there is a God, but he does not believe that there is a reason or not some sort of meaning to the sacrifice of Isaac, or he doesn't have a sort of hope or a sort of, faith that in doing so, Isaac, his son, or the role of being a father will be no more. It just seems to be not empty because he is doing it to prove or to see or to follow that God does exist, but he doesn't believe that God will, I wouldn't say reward him, but a sacrifice usually follows a reward, or predisposes a reward of some sort, or some sort of thank you. It just seems like it's almost like empty just to be empty, or just to do it. And so I guess Kierkegaard eventually will prove or will display how the sacrifice, or the willingness to sacrifice Isaac, was not malicious, was not out of the ordinary, because Abraham had the complete understanding and the complete faith that God would not only allow Isaac, or would see Isaac in some sort of other form, but that Abraham would still be able to father, or to still have some sort of parental role to some sort of form of Isaac, or to see that, yes, I am proving myself to the God that I believe in, but he is also proving to me that I am someone to believe, right? So that's what I'm getting at here. Because I think I realize that when I read these books, I'll be like, oh, I sort of get it, and then I don't explain what I get, Right. Yeah. Go. If Abraham did not already believe God's existence, there would clearly be difficulties. If the test was a proof of Abraham's belief in the existence of God, who could Abraham suppose set the test? The story says he accepted that God had set it, but then he already believed in God's existence, and that would just be as true as if he failed the test. What the test requires of Abraham is not that he believed that God exists, but that he believed that God both wants and will be able to give him back his opportunity to exercise parental love. So this is kind of what I was just saying, right? Faith in God's existence is something Abraham already has. The faith he is to prove is his believing that he will not in the end be deprived of Isaac, even if he carries out God's command to kill him. Sweet. So that seems to be like the main thing. Yes, man. We are getting this. In the end does not include in the hereafter. It is Jonas de Silento's. It is as Jonas de Silento says, for this life that he believes in the possibility of getting Isaac back on the strength of the absurd. Abraham's trial to show that he believes that he and Isaac will be living together again even after he is sacrificed. We can get nearer to the core of the story of Kierkegaard's version by varying its scenario. Suppose Kierkegaard had indeed intended that the test should be of Abraham's faith in God's existence. That would have meant that Abraham had an option of not believing in the existence of God, and given the nature of the test of Abraham, would surely find it hard to associate it with belief in any kind of deity that would want to believe it existed so for theoretical reasons as well as to protect Isaac, he would no doubt choose not to believe. Suppose, secondly, that Abraham sacrifices Isaac and does not get him back in the end. That might mean that the test was not at all as Abraham supposed. The test could have been to withstand the temptation to suspend the ethical theology, for God could have a Hegelian who wanted to have proof of Abraham's faith in the rightness of accomplishment of the universal. Or suppose, thirdly, that we exclude the possibility of Hegelian God, but still Abraham does not get Isaac back. Could a God such as Abraham believed in demand such an action, intending Abraham to believe he will get and yet not give Isaac back? Or would be some kind of proof that God did not exist? Okay, let's see how many pages we've read. Bruh, we have read 13 pages. Should we just push the hour? I don't know. Let me just see if my friend. Yeah, Terry coming through. Yeah, I think I'm done for today. And we will use this as a bookmark. My friend's mom. And luckily we ended right on a new paragraph. So that was enjoyable. That is part 1 of Fear and Trembling by Søren Kierkegaard. We got a lot done today. I really missed doing these Let's Reads. Keeps me attentive to these. So I'll also get some new tape so I could tape this, and then it won't be as harsh on it. Yeah, because that's kind of blinding. Alrighty.